Cue intro. Love and light, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of El Podcast, the greatest virtual happy hour in the world. It's hosted by yours truly, Kai Primo and Jesse Wright. So grab a drink because today we have an incredible guest with us. Caleb James DeLisle has been an open source developer for over 12 years. He's currently the lead developer for Packet, which is a project on a mission to decentralize access to the internet. It's quite a giant mission, my friend. So let's get into it. But first, please subscribe on YouTube and give us a follow on Spotify so you never miss another virtual happy hour with us. So cheers, everybody. And thank you, Caleb, for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
How about you tell us about yourself and how you got involved in the crypto space?
I mean, I was involved in cryptography to some extent since, a fairly long time. I mean, my first really significant project was CZ, which is a encrypted networking project. And I began that project around 2011. And that project, the objective was to make it so that you could have a network where regular people own and operated the infrastructure. Seems like it should be that way. It should be that easy. You shouldn't need to have this centralized global ISP that owns all the network. And there turns out there's a lot of things that make that difficult and complicated. And there's a lot of reasons why the ISP does exist. But, we started that project and obviously the cryptography was an aspect, but because it has this very liberational perspective, this project, we sort of knew a lot of the people involved in Bitcoin. I knew about Bitcoin. I dabbled in it. One line of code is mine. Over time, 2014 was when I came to France and I started working for a company that does knowledge management. In that company, I built a project called CryptPad. As you can use it. It's at cryptpad.fr and it's an open source project, which is a little bit like Google Docs, except what's cool about it is that the server doesn't know what you're typing. So everything is encrypted from your browser to the other person's browser the people you're collaborating with. So that's really nice. Once the Bitcoin Lightning Network started to become a thing was when I started to look back at the networking problem, because one of the things that never really could be done with networking, we didn't really ever have a way to pay in this decentralized world. You could make a network, you could say you're making a network, but you can't pay for the infrastructure of that network. And if you can't pay for the infrastructure, I mean, let's face it, infrastructure isn't free. So it got me really excited that finally there was a way to do these fast micropayments with Lightning, and it was in theory infinitely scalable. And so around 2017, I left that job with CryptPad, and I moved on to start working on PKT, which ends up being the blockchain, the world's first blockchain based on a bandwidth hard proof of work. And we wanted bandwidth hard because it would make it so that people would be expending bandwidth all the time, using that internet in order to mine, which then once you're using it to mine, you need to get the internet in order, you get lots of internet. And then once you're getting lots of internet, then you have that internet that you can then share, with your neighbors and people in your community.
How would you explain Packet to, the layperson?
Packet is a community. It's a vision. It's the idea that you and I and everybody else can just own our own piece of the internet infrastructure. If I run a fiber optic cable to your house, or if you put an antenna on top of your roof and you point it at the neighbor, that piece of infrastructure should be able to become part of the internet, and you should be paid for that, and you should be able to provide that internet to your neighbor. That's how I would explain it. That's because when you get into crypto and cryptography and yields and money and fiat and it just you lose people. So by focusing people on the idea that and the vision that by putting an antenna outside your window, you can share access to the internet with other people, and you can get paid. And that is through a decentralized network where there isn't any one company who can just say, oh, I don't like you, I'm shutting you off. That's the vision, and that's what I would explain.
Talk about how this concept was formulated in the beginning?
See, grew up in a rural area. Tell people the wood. If you're American, you get it. If you're European, you might think we actually literally lived in a forest in a tent. But it was very rural, and we had only the dial-up internet for the longest time, far after DSL and cable were common in other places. And I would look out the window and look at the neighbor. You could see the neighbor over the hill. Could you give an idea of where I really was living? And I thought to myself, if I just put an antenna in my window, I could make a connection to those people over on the hill there. And if they put an antenna, they could make a connection. There's another house down there that they can see that's over the other hill. And if they could put an antenna, then maybe we could get internet back to the city, and where we could actually get internet and we could provide ourselves with internet. We wouldn't need to wait for a telephone company that may or may not ever even come. And that idea just grew in my mind for a very long time. And I started thinking, well, why don't we do that? Why doesn't this exist? And a lot of the why is because it's very hard for the network you can't really build a network where individual people or companies own their own parts of it. You need to kind of have somebody in charge of any given network. Now, the exception to that rule is the internet. Nobody is actually in charge of the internet. But the reason why that exception works is because of a protocol called BGP, which is a brilliantly designed protocol, but it's very hard to use. You need to be a top level expert to operate BGP routers, and you need to basically, there are these gray bearded guys who work for these ISPs, and they have this kind of secret knowledge about how to operate BGP. Now, BGP holds the internet together, but it's just not accessible. And my thinking was, well, can't we make this accessible? Can't we make this something that everybody can just point that antenna, connect that wire, and they're done? They don't even have to think about that network ever again, as long as it's turned on and the wire stays connected. So that was the origin of it. And from there, started thinking about, okay, what's CJDNS, then the payment aspect, and then, how do we get from here to there?
The idea is really neat. Let's say if I were to share my bandwidth, wouldn't I still need an internet service provider? I don't know how to access it just on my own.
Right. So, of course, yes, you need to get the internet from somewhere. But a little known fact is the ISPs do too. They have to get the internet from somewhere as well. And they go to other ISPs and they get the internet from them. Say you have a local small cable company, let's say. Well, that cable company is probably going to one of these larger companies to buy most of their access to the internet. But there's another thing that these companies can do, which is really cool. It's called peering. Maybe in my town, there's a little internet ISP, and in your town, there's a little ISP, and they both have their equipment in the same data center. Well, they can peer by interconnecting that equipment. And so when I want to send a message to you over the internet, it goes to my ISP and it just goes straight to your ISP. It doesn't need to go to their internet provider. They still need one in order to send a message to Timbuktu or whatever. But in order to send it from me to you, it goes direct. So that's how the internet works. Everybody has to get internet from somebody else. What you can do as an individual or a small business, you can often buy fiber. You need to contact these certain companies, and it's a little more expensive, or a lot more expensive than regular consumer internet. But if you're able to then monetize that by selling it on to all the people in your community, you can bring a fiber line in and you can actually become a little mini ISP in that community. The main problem is that there's, the registering a business is a problem. Invoicing your neighbors for that service that you're providing is a problem. And providing tech support's a problem, and providing the networking and the routing is the problem. It's not so much actually getting the internet. It's really all in the administration aspect of it.
Right. I saw in previous interviews how you kind of use the analogy of an Uber, where Uber is separating the administrative from the actual physical cars. I mean, can you kind of explain that's applied to PKT?
It's kind of a cliche to say we're the Uber of, but we need to recognize that Uber did something really clever. And what they did was they took this ball of service and infrastructure, and they separated it out, where the infrastructure can be owned by individuals and the service can be provided by a tech company. And so they're able to get their prices down by economies of scale. Clearly, if you're providing taxi service to the entire world, it's going to be cheaper per ride for you to provide taxi service than it is if you're providing taxi service to everybody in just one city. And so then once you separate the infrastructure, now you have people who normally would not have driven, and now they're able to drive. So now you have competition on the side of the infrastructure because you bring more people to become taxi drivers, and then you bring more competition on the side of the service. Well, Uber doesn't really directly do that, but if you think about Uber plus Lyft, there's competition on the service side and there's competition on the infrastructure side. So as a result, we have this taxis are just getting so much better. And we old folks have to explain to the youngins about how it used to be that you get in a taxi and your feet would stick to the floor and the guy would not speak any English. And you drive around all these little back roads and run the meter up to crazy amounts and say that he's taking a shortcut. And, taxis were a disaster. You couldn't even find them in a lot of cases. And now it's just like, as Uber says, transport is like flowing water. Well, I think we can do the same thing with ISPs, because right now they've combined the aspect of the service, the invoicing, the billing, the customer service, the support, the routing, the networking, all those aspects of that are hard to do from a technical perspective. You've got to be smart. And the infrastructure, which is all the stuff that you've got to be physically near to the customer. And when you need to be smart and you need to be physically near the customer, that's hard. It's hard if you're a taxi company. It's hard if you're an ISP, and that stifles competition. When you can be smart but anywhere in the world, you have a lot of competition because everybody wants to be smart. Everybody wants to make a tech company. And then when you can run infrastructure being close to your customer, but you don't need to be really smart to do it, then you're also going to get a lot of competition because a lot of people will be enabled to participate.
I was reading some of your papers. I read the white paper for PKT. I read your paper for CryptPad, and you talk kind of a lot about like surveillance capitalism and privacy. Especially with 2020, I think maybe privacy and surveillance capitalism is on people's minds a lot more than it used to be. And this is just not just related to PKT, but just kind of your general thoughts on surveillance capitalism.
It is a problem, but not in the way most people imagine it. Is people say like, well, people get cornered into this thought process of, well, do you have secrets or you do not have secrets? And that's the wrong thought process, because just knowing that I happen to like coffee and bread in the morning is giving that company a little bit of knowledge that they can use. And when they multiply that knowledge over everybody in the world, now they have this knowledge that they can use to kind of steer society. And that's a problem for government. It's a problem for society as a whole. It's a huge problem. It's not really a problem for you or me as individuals. It's a problem for society. Now, what do we do about it? Well, fortunately, we don't really have to do that much. I mean, the GDPR did a great job in Europe of reining this in. It would be great if the US would copy that. A lot of these services are just not doing that well. I mean, you look at Meta; it's a disaster. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Elon taking over Twitter. I think he'll probably improve it because he has a great track record for improving things. But by and large, people are moving away from these big centralized corporate networks. They're moving toward things that are a little smaller, a little more self-hosted, a little bit more community-oriented. And I mean, I'm a big proponent of the Fediverse. I'm a user of the Fediverse, It's not good if you want to be a celebrity, but if you want to just, talk with your friends, the Fediverse is a great place to hang out. You can join an instance that's operated by, a small instance where the administrators. The moderation policy is going to be a lot better than in these big systems. Nobody at Facebook is going to look at your post if you get reported for spam. It's going to be an algorithm that's going to decide if that's if that post is getting taken down or not. And whereas on the Fediverse, you may even know the people who are looking at this. They may contact you and say, "Hey, somebody reported that you were doing something a little over the top. Could you stop?" That's the kind of thing that'll never roll back. Once people see the value of switching and they see how to interact in that kind of a system, I don't see them ever really switching back to the old systems, and not in mass anyway. But it takes time for them to adopt it. It takes time to get a system where there isn't a single, universe of people, where you can't really be a celebrity. It just doesn't work. It's just different.
I've heard you talk about the Fediverse and in some of your other interviews. I know you're a big fan of it. I guess for me is I just don't necessarily know how many average people, and you have to run your own server. And I think that's a barrier for a lot of people. I mean, I feel like, Kai and I live in Puerto Rico, which is a crypto hotspot. And I feel like there's two types of people. You have people that think Web3 will change the world. It's the greatest thing. It's going to bring decentralization and power back to the people. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because you're actually a developer. Most of these people that I talk to here, they're actually just kind of influencers or they're promoters. So they don't actually know anything about the tech. And then on the other side, like we just had David Gerard on last week, who wrote a book called Attack on the 50-Foot Blockchain, which basically he says all crypto is a scam. And so I tend to think that both groups are wrong. And I think it's more in the middle. Like some of these projects will change the world, but there's over 21,000 coins out, or 21,000 crypto projects. I think the vast majority of them won't be around. In a previous interview, I heard you say that like you don't have a whole lot of hope for the metaverse. You think it's Mark Zuckerberg trying to save Facebook. So, what does this space mean to you as a developer?
I'm going to take the win on the prediction about Facebook, because you just look at their stock price. It's an absolute nightmare. The writing was on the wall for him when he said, "Oh, we're rebranding as Meta." Why? Why'd you do that? Why? Why now? The thing about blockchains is, it's a force of liberation, because it allows people to organize without any central authority. It takes a long time to get from point A to point B. Like 1999, people were saying, "Oh, we're not going to have newspapers anymore because of the internet." Well, yeah, eventually, but they're not gone yet. And the struggle has been absolutely hideous with these organizations. They have fought all the way to maintain their clout. It wasn't just like, "Oh, we now have the internet, we'll do that." There is a learning process. You need to figure out, like, Web 1.0, the forums, they turned the forums into Web 2.0. It became collaborative. Then it was so much better because, now you can have everybody can participate. Everybody can have their own web page. Their own web page was MySpace. And then MySpace turned into Facebook because it was easier to build a Facebook page than it was to make a MySpace page. You remember where you're from, and you can see that where we're going, it's going to take time. It's not all going to be solved on the first day. So, a little bit the Gartner hype cycle, just overlaid over and over and over again. As a force of liberation, blockchain is going to exist into the long term. And I think it's going to replace central banks. I think it's going to separate government. I think it will separate money from state in the long term, or even in the medium term. It could be. I want to also give a lot of credit to a lot of the Web3 stuff, which is on the right direction. However, as with everything, you guys must remember the .com rush, the gold rush, when everybody was trying to get a domain name. Everybody wanted to get their .com, and somebody made like a fortune selling people .com domain names, and then it all just collapsed. Some of those domain names turned out to be worth something, but the vast majority of them, it was just, it all went down the drain with the .com crash. I think that we're going to see a lot of that. It's a learning process. It's just you have to walk before you can run. You have to take one step at a time. You look to your past and you can see what the future looks like. However, one thing I'm very adamant about is that I believe that we are in a period, in an enlightenment period. We are transitioning from a world order, you might say, where things work in a certain way, to a world order, you might say, not to be confused with the New World Order. We're not going there, but a world order that works in a different way, which is more participatory.
Can you simplify what Web3 is and what is it supposed to accomplish?
I don't identify particularly as a Web3 developer. What I say about Web3 is it's an umbrella. And you can stand under the umbrella and then you're Web3. And if you don't stand under the umbrella, you're not Web3. Is Bitcoin Web3? Some people will say it is. Some people will say it's not. Bitcoiners existed longer than Web3 people. What about BitTorrent or some of the older technologies, Tor, I2P? Like, do you consider these to be Web3? Well, they don't have a money aspect. Some people have defined Web3 as being the replacement of Web2, as in surveillance capitalism, with a system where you're no longer the product, you're the customer, because you're able to pay for that experience. However, what about the Fediverse? Is the Fediverse Web3? I mean, it doesn't cost anything to use it. So you don't actually have to run your own server. There's dozens of servers. You can sign up for any of them you want. All you need to do really is vet the operator of that server, because you're a little bit at their mercy, because they're the one who gets to decide if they're going to ban you.
I feel like Web3 is an attempt to kind of redo the web. Like, the internet started out in 1964 as a project through DARPA, and it was never really designed to be commercialized. And then all of a sudden, once the government and these other organizations realized how powerful it was, then I feel like they wanted to kind of redo it. Like I said, with all the tech censorship, and which is, a reason to have the decentralized internet. But I feel like a lot of these projects are a way to try to monetize something that they didn't monetize in the first place, because it was never designed to be monetized. It was designed to be used among researchers at universities and the military.
That actually leads me to dare I call it a conspiracy theory? I don't think that inside the DoD, I don't think that it was meant to be a research network. I think that they applied for funding, asking for a research network. But I think internally, they imagined the open web. Those people, and if you read their writings, you can see that they were imagining a lot of the things that exist today. And they were, to a significant extent, crypto anarchists who had worked their way into the Department of Defense and gotten these research projects on the auspices of creating a network that would survive nuclear war. And what they did was they created a network which would survive anything. Now, I feel that network is something that we just need to perfect. We need to improve on it. But I definitely think that the people who were designing it were thinking about us and where we would be today when everybody in the world is able to talk to each other and compare notes and say that political leader, they're lying. And to go around these old infrastructure, these old institutions.
In a lot of your papers, it seems like you may be fearful that at some point, like, the internet will be either more controlled or censored or just shut off. I mean, do you is that one of the reasons you started working on PKT? I mean, you've been working on this project for 8 years now. From when you first started with the protocol that's underneath PKT.
Unfortunately, there are people who want to do this. I mean, you don't need to go any further than the what's a woman from New Zealand, prime minister? I don't know how this works. Saying that we need a new internet where things are controlled, and it's too much misinformation, and we need to have central control over the internet. They want to go back to the TV where they can decide what's going to be on the channel, but they also want a TV that can watch you. They want it both ways. And as far as like internet shutdowns, yeah, I mean, the problem that we have is that these ISPs are a choke point, and you've got like 4 companies, and you got to make four phone calls in order to cut all of those people off. And it's not something that's like, well, yeah, sure, they find another solution, but it's something that might happen in a time of crisis, a time of high tension, when those are the moments when you need to get those videos collected and get them out of that country. And that's why, actually, one thing I really appreciate about Elon Musk is doing Starlink, because he's able, people have another solution if the dictator or the government turns off the internet in order to prevent people from getting the word out about what's going on. Then those people can just use Starlink.
Ooh, I have an interesting question then. I'm really fascinated by this decentralized internet. Let's say I had Starlink. Would I then be able to connect to the packet network and then be able to sell your unused bandwidth?
So the company that I work for, PacketPal, is working on like a device, and the device, you just plug it into your router. It presents a wireless access point. Person connects to that wireless access point. It's the same story as you connect to the internet at the airport. You have a free tier, so you can just do a little CAPTCHA, and you'll be online for a couple hours. Or if you want to have a faster internet connection, then you can pay $5 a week in order to have faster access. And some of that money goes back to the person who is running the device, and is just paid to them as crypto. So they don't even need to, set up a bank account or a business or invoicing. It's just crypto that shows up in your wallet.
Yeah, thanks for that. It seems like it's pretty easy to use. We have some friends here on the island that actually have the Packet Pal. You're kind of a Bitcoin maximalist, is that correct?
If somebody says, "Hey, what coin should I buy?" I would tend to tell them, you know what? If you're putting your retirement or something in it, Bitcoin is probably going to be safer for you. I'm never going to tell somebody like, "Oh yeah, put your money into this Moon token, whatever." These people get wiped out on these projects, and it's just sad. Now, as far as Packet, what I would say to people is, the amount of money that you would dedicate to Packet should be the amount of money that represents how much you believe in this vision of an internet that can't be turned off. You take that money and say, this is what I believe, and this is what I'm going to put in it. Bitcoin is a bit the same way. This is the money that I put in a place where a central bank can't take it from me. It's off limits to central banks. Even if the price goes to zero, the central bank will not take it away. And I think that that's how you have to think about crypto. I think that Monero and Zcash are very valuable projects because they create this ability to have a private coin that nobody knows who you gave it to or who you got it from. That has an important role in society. Again, you take the money that you say, you know what, I'm willing to lose this on this vision of money outside of the control of central banks, on the idea, the vision of money that can't be traced, on the vision of internet that cannot be turned off. Take that money and you put it into those categories based on how much you believe. I tend to tell people, if it's a token, if it's just an ERC20, it was just invented by somebody, it's not mined, then be careful. I'm also very careful about the whole proof of stake thing. I don't know how that's going to turn out. I think Ethereum's just they volunteered their user base for an experiment, basically.
Yeah, I think when you have the proof of stake, doesn't that just kind of go back to re-centralization, where the people that have the most tokens essentially control the network? What as a developer, what do you say to that?
When we created Packet, there was, of course, some discussion about proof of stake. And what I said was, I can't get comfortable with it. Doesn't mean it's not possible. It means that I can't get comfortable with it. I look at the security properties of this thing, and they're not comfortable for me. Now, Ethereum's doing it. Will it be okay? We're going to find out. That's the reality. Will they be forced back into a proof of work system, or will people flee to other coins, or Ethereum turns into a de facto bank where any transaction that is considered in violation of US law is shuttered? These are real possibilities. And I don't want to say that I know what's going to happen. I think that more what I want to say is that I don't know. I don't feel confident that none of these things will happen.
Yeah, the reason I asked you about the Bitcoin Maximalist mostly is just because I'm not so much as an investor, but like in 10 years from now, and I've heard you talk before about the Lightning Network, how the Lightning Network is making smaller, payments possible, micropayments. And like, how does that happen? I mean, if you believe at some point that the Bitcoin will be kind of the reserve currency, then things would be priced in Bitcoin and not dollars or euros or whatever the currency. I mean, what would Web3 look like if that was the case?
I don't think it's going to be that different, because you think about it, like you might buy dollars, like you might buy Bitcoin like you buy dollars, but you might also own a token that represents a piece of the bakery across the road from your house, or the coffee shop down the street, or a token that represents a piece of a house that's down the road. I think the future is many different kinds of coins, many different kinds of tokens, tokens that have utility, that are valuable, that provide themselves value to society. And the ones that don't, those are the ones that are just going to go away. But it doesn't mean that it's going to be a world where Bitcoin is the only thing. I mean, how would you represent stock, for instance, or how would you represent any tokenized ownership or fractional ownership of anything if you didn't have some kind of a token?
What are some examples of utilities that is valuable to humanity?
I don't pay that much attention to NFTs. It's
Okay.
not because I don't like them or I think the idea is bunk. It's more because I don't have a lot of time. But I can say what I think should be an NFT. Tokenized solar panel. You want to own a one thousandth of a solar panel and get paid out every time it generates some power, right? What about a tokenized nuclear power plant? I mean, here in Europe, we're suffering this energy crisis, and we're all realizing that, well, we should have focused on nuclear from the beginning because it's actually not that unsafe, and it really does work. Well, nuclear power plants are incredibly expensive. Why can't we own one little piece of that nuclear power plant, and every time that it generates power, you get a little power token, and then with that power token you can turn that in and be given some electricity, or you can sell it on the market. And why not do that? These are the kind of ideas I think that you just need to use this technology in order to build real physical things that benefit people. Tokenized fiber runs, you run a fiber from between two cities. It's very expensive to do so. Why don't you tokenize the ownership of that fiber, and then the people who own that token can own the bandwidth leases on that fiber, which you can then sell to the packet network. Those are the kinds of things that I think make a lot of sense to tokenize. Art is a very old market. People consider certain things to be valuable. The reason why you put a painting on your wall is because you want to signal to somebody else that you believe in somebody, a third person. So if I want to say that I care about Picasso, I mean, that's who I am. I'm a person who cares a lot about Picasso. I will buy that Picasso and I'll put it on my wall to indicate to everybody who comes into my room that I care about Picasso. And NFTs do solve that problem. They allow you to give something which in principle ends up in the hands of an artist that you care about, and you're able to then display that. Where I think NFTs go wrong is when people are buying it when they don't care about that artist. They don't want that artist to do well in life. All they care about is the idea that in another month they're going to be able to flip it and make more money than they got into it. And that is a corruption of the vision. When your vision is corrupted, then you expose yourself to making bad decisions.
The internet in the 90s, a lot of people, I feel like, use the same buzzwords now with Web3, talking about how it decentralized and like you're talking about, I mean, anyone could post something. You didn't just need to read the local newspaper in the 90s once you had the internet. And then the tech companies kind of took over and they kind of got re-centralized. And, Bitcoin ushered in the first digital currency, or at least, the first cryptocurrency. But then I kind of wonder, like, the SHA-256 protocol was created by the NSA. I mean, Tor was developed by the U.S. Navy in the mid 90s to, keep the identity of their people private. And so, I mean, could we be headed towards a world where the actual governments use this technology against the people, where you have a central bank digital currency and you have a credit score, and if you go over your carbon limit, you're not able to fill up your gas tank? And, I mean, I hear these theories. I mean, as a developer, what do you say to that?
The thing is about these people is, I mean, they're not that bright. They're following some plan that their great grandfathers made 1,000 years ago, and they imagine that they're going to steer society in a certain direction, and then guess what? The world's complicated. There's a lot of smart people out there doing a lot of different things, myself included, and I don't think you're going to get there. I think that they tried this in Nigeria. They tried a CBDC in Nigeria. It was an absolute flop. The only thing that came out of it was a whole bunch of people got exposed to the idea of digital wallets, and now they're all Bitcoiners. So good job.
Yeah, I kind of backfired on him then, didn't it?
Yeah, I'm not particularly worried. We have to keep working. We have to usher in this era of enlightenment. We have to work really hard to make sure that we get from where we were to where we want to be. A decentralized world, a world where everybody participates, not a world where we own nothing and we're happy. A world where we think we are, but without the corruption. Because where we think we are, we all live in democracy, we all vote for our leaders, we all have, everything is by rule of law. That's where we are told that we are. Well, why don't we go there by simply using the technology to undermine the corruption, which makes it so that we're not actually able to experience what they say that we have?
That's such a really big vision. How does one convince the entire world to collaborate with that same vision of, being a decentralized or owning nothing and being happy?
Well, I mean, as far as like the German Darth Vader guy who stands up and says these silly things, I mean, all people need to do is watch him, and they're like, "Oh, not for me." You're going to eat the bugs and this silly crap. I mean, he's his own worst enemy. If he just said nothing, he'd be better off. But how do we get people to get on board with these ideas? Talking about it, addressing the concerns. Obviously, there are, legitimate concerns. There's, obviously people think, oh, it's a scam, or it's, it's going to generate all this carbon, and explaining to people how, well, no, I mean, we should have been generating energy with nuclear since 70 years ago. We should have been generating nuclear energy with molten salt reactors, which had been, I mean, they were demoed 70 years ago. It was 1960, 70, 80, 90, 2000, 2010, 2020, 60 years ago. They were demoed 60 years ago. We had molten salt reactors. They don't create, they can't explode. They can't really melt down, and this stuff has existed. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not free energy. It's just like, it actually works. It exists. Everybody knows it exists. Nobody even disputes it. And yet we don't have it. And then they're talking about how, oh, blah, 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 this is carbon. No, stop. But I think we're heading in the right direction. I think the more people talk, the more people get into social media, especially decentralized social media, where the moderation is done by humans instead of algorithms. Just having people in decentralized social media. I mean, Elon Musk is the greatest person for this in the world because, number one, he took over Twitter and made it more free speech there. But number two, all the people who didn't like him went to the Fediverse, and there's more free speech there. So it's just win-win. And actually, the Fediverse has so much more potential than even what Twitter can be under Musk. So it's just win-win-win-win all the way across.
How do you think he's going to change Twitter? Have you read about like his plans for it, or has he laid out anything to where?
I mean, it's just up in the air, right? Some people say he's going to fail. I think that is very early to say what he's selling. It does make sense. I mean, he's selling the KYC, the validation that you're a real human being, that you're not a bot that somebody wrote on a computer one day, and that you're not impersonating somebody, that you're not is doing certain things. So, and then, if you pay that and then you cause trouble, he's going to take your money. And this actually has existed in the past. It's called Something Awful. And people who know about Something Awful will know that the social implications of that website are huge. They charge people $10 to register. It's just a one-off $10 in order to register. And if you abuse the service, they kick you out, So that was like one of the big things that really steered internet culture prior to 4chan. And so then 4chan came in, the ball shifted, but Something Awful was one of the big players early in the internet culture, before Reddit, before Reddit became garbage, but before Reddit was, even when it was good, Something Awful was a really significant player. So he's not the first one to have the idea, and so there's reasons to think that could work.
Yeah, gosh, I guess we're gonna find out.
Indeed. I'm really excited. I'm excited because he has money to make Twitter do things, like to make it so that, for example, he can write algorithms that are going to spot people that are posting stuff with malintent, right? He'll be able to find that out. He has the algorithms to do it. So it's going to be really exciting. On the other side, the Fediverse, it's just a different beast. It has this very ingrained, organized culture of different people. Nobody understands the Fediverse, least of which are the celebrities and journalists who are moving to it. These people have no idea what's coming to them. I'm just tell you right now, they will all be gone from the Fediverse within a month, in my opinion, if not sooner. They're all going to end up either back at Twitter, or they're going to try to do their own thing, or I don't know what, but I cannot see a world where they can survive in the Fediverse. And if they try, it's going to be even worse, because they're going to bring all their readers to the Fediverse, and then they're going to get banned, and then they're going to have scandals, and they're going to get harassed, because there's all these different little sub communities in the Fediverse, and just trying to become like a super celebrity. People have tried it in the past. It never worked. People would come and they would try to build a e-following on the Fediverse, and it's an absolute nightmare.
It seems like a better place to be than where all these, regular people want to be influencers or quote unquote influencers and have this massive following online, even though they don't really add any value.
The original idea of Twitter, the thing that comes to your mind, you say it, and people can interact with it, and they're real people that interact with it, and they say their thing, then the Fediverse is great. But if you're thinking that you're going to come in as a VIP and make a splash and gain a big following, I mean, the best example, it's like thinking that you're going to invade Afghanistan. The amount of things that will start to go wrong for you, and then it will pile up from all the different little sub communities, because there are a lot of them, and you're just going to end up mired in this thick web of politics and drama that it's just above anybody's head. So, I mean, for regular people, it's a trip. It's fun. It's super fun. You choose your own adventure. You want to be on the free speech instances where people post crazy stuff, or you want to be on the the instances where it's more relaxed, more polite. You choose your adventure. It's just like what Twitter was supposed to be.
Can you explain what the Fediverse is?
It's a concept of, if you take Twitter and you take the internet and you just merge them two together. So you've got all these different little Twitters, and some of them are little Instagrams and little different things, but they all interact. So you can follow somebody on a different server. And so what that means is the moderation is very complicated. So when there's an abuse complaint, what happens is the complaint goes from the person who made it on their server to, if it's the same server, it's easy. They send it to the administrator. If it's not the same server, it goes from one server to the other. The administrator of the other server looks at it and applies their policy, which may be nothing in the case of some of the free speech instances, or it may be a very strict policy, or whatever. Maybe they know the person who the complaint is about. Maybe they don't. Then they will address it in their way. Now, what's great is that there's a ton of moderation because every instance has, the admin to user ratio is wonderful. What is crazy is that there are over 9,000 servers. Each one has its own moderation policy. There are over 9,000 administrators, and that's just the opportunity for petty drama is insane. What is it? It's the big brain. It's the singularity. It's the hive mind. It's all these different servers with different people on them, all interacting with each other and just posting stuff and trying to stay together. And because also servers will block servers. If one of the servers is too far out there, the other one might block it. But that doesn't mean a third server will block it. So there's all this different stuff going on in order to overall create some kind of a social consensus, a rough social consensus.
It seems like it's an experiment on governance. So it seems like everything is manually moderated. For instance, we have a TikTok account, and we posted a lot of Act 20, Act 60, and tax incentives here in Puerto Rico. And we get reported a lot. A lot of the arguments are misinformed and so on and so forth. And so then we would get our video taken down. And then you have to appeal the video to get it back up. And then literally like within a minute, your video's back up. There's no malintent. But it sounds like the Fediverse, it's each server, like someone has to like physically manually reads it and then decides.
Yeah.
So your governance is all the people and the value within each little community that is created, right?
Yeah.
Did I get that right? Or
exactly.
So how is that important? Why is this important?
Number one is, of course, on the on Twitter or whatever, or TikTok, if you want to get something taken down, you can just mass report it. You can get a bunch of people on your side to go and mass report that thing. And I think on Twitter, it used to be 500 reports would automatically get that thing taken down until there was some manual intervention. Well, on the Fediverse, if you're like coordinating a bunch of people to report something, you're going to annoy the administrator, and you don't want to do that. They're going to be annoyed with you. They're going to have like this 500 reports, and they're like, okay, who's behind this? Why did this happen? So a lot of that like kind of gaming the system stuff that works on, say, Twitter, maybe TikTok, and Facebook, it doesn't work on the Fediverse, especially because you might report something on one server, and then but the admin of that server looks at it and is like, I don't care, or I'm just going to block all the reports from you because you keep reporting crap. Or they'll even talk to the admin of your server saying, hey, they're abusing the report button. You gotta talk to them, and all this stuff, like it works itself out. And then of course there's servers where the reports don't. They just go in the trash. Everything, everybody, there's all different kinds of people and servers in that network, and where you fit in, you can decide where you fit in. However, it's very hard to run a brand on a Fediverse. I would not try. I would only post things as an individual, just because, we have a server with packeterium.xyz, and it's kind of like a coordination server for the anybody who's interested in Packet could join with that server. However, it's not really a brand server. It's more of a watering hole for the community. But as far as running a brand, it's been done mostly open source projects. Open source projects they can brand, but very, 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 very hard to be a brand on the Fediverse, because people just don't want to see advertising. They don't want to see brands. Just go away.
Sounds like a digital version of Burning Man.
Yeah.
You can't use money. You can't sell anything. It's participatory and so on. So it's very interesting. And I'm still trying to grasp the concept of DAOs and, decentralized autonomous organizations and governance and all these little mini experiments that people are having with governance, and trying to understand, so how do you incentivize people to participate in these kinds of communities when most of the world are, in survival mode, right? Are they going to care about moderating someone's tweet?
We have a model. We have a model for how governance can work. It's like the mesh model where I did a presentation some years ago called BGP and the Rule of Custom. Where the idea was that you don't have these hard rules. You have BGP, that is the internet, is ruled primarily by customs, by people have their way of doing things, and this gets to the peering idea where you have these different ISPs are peering with one another, and they can say, well, I'm not going to peer with you anymore because you run a lot of spam. That has worked really well for keeping horrible stuff off the internet, but also providing a huge amount of free speech. And it's a similar idea with the Fediverse, where you just everything is by friend to friend. So if you have no friends on the Fediverse, if nobody wants to talk to you, if every server bans you, you're doing something wrong. You're going too far. But as long as you have some connections, you have more connections, you're part of that swarm of servers, and that swarm is what guides the consensus about what is and is not acceptable speech.
I just wanted to ask if you have any parting thoughts or any message that we should hear before you go.
In my opinion, we are in a period of enlightenment. Everything looks very crazy because we're waking up to the reality of the world that we have lived in for the past 20, 40, 50 years. All you need to do is look back to the 90s or the 2000s to see that life back then was objectively worse than it is now, but we couldn't see it. We didn't have the basis to understand the power structures that were ruling over us at that time. Now we can see it, and so everything looks like it's much worse. But what we're seeing is the darkness of the tunnel because we can see the light at the end of it.
Wow, that's really deep. Are you highly spiritual or?
No, I just think that's a fact. It's a fact that the internet develops. I'm just futurist.
20 years from now, where could we be and where should we be?
As long as we can keep it together for the next, I think 10 years. I think 10 years, 15 years. We're in a pretty sensitive period right now. I mean, we need to avoid a cataclysmic world war. That's very important. I believe we can get to a world where things work the way they're supposed to work. Where you just elect your leaders and they actually represent you. Where the laws are written in such a way that protect the weak from the strong, and that don't protect some secret corporation from competition. We could be in a place where we live in the same constitutional democracies that we think we live in now, but that they actually deliver for us. We could have that. Will we? I mean, I think we should try. I think it's worth trying. Why shouldn't we? But it's important that we take the proper steps. We need to continue down this road. We need to make sure that the internet doesn't get turned off. It's very, very, very important that we need to maintain our ability to communicate. We need to unwind, let's say, the previous oligarchy or aristocracy or Illuminati, whatever word you want to say for it, or the establishment. We need to unwind that in an orderly fashion so that the new infrastructure can take its place. And we need to do it in a very, very orderly so that when the new things are coming in and there's teething problems, because there will be, that this doesn't have a negative impact on lots of people.
Yeah, I do believe also that it's bound to get messy first before you can kind of pulverize some of that old infrastructure and rebuild new ones. But I guess we've got the front seat to watch. And since you're truly one of the ones that are trying out there, thank you.
I think we can do this in a completely orderly way as long as we focus on the key points. Nobody in this is really a bad person. Everybody did the thing that made sense to them to do at the time. Maybe a little forgiveness. We need to restructure how we contain people who are doing things that we can't allow them to do. And we need to just move forward. Enlightenment. Just say the word and then think about what that means.
Anyway, I mean, I could ask you about markets too and what your thoughts are in the current economic state of the world.
Jerome Powell's the most powerful man in the world, and right now he wants to tighten the rate. So he will tighten the rate, and people will feel pain until
how long?
Until people stop being stupid. We need the people who are just going to run the country and make things okay, and not be crazy and not be wild politics and wild stuff. Just run things, because then the inflation will come down, and once inflation will come down, then Jerome Powell will stop hitting the market with a wrecking ball.
Tell us what happened to FTX.
I want to first talk about what, for me, my reaction. So I didn't know about FTX until it collapsed. I kind of do developer things. I'm not paying attention. Something as big as FTX can just go under my radar if I don't know anybody who knows anybody who's involved. That's something that happens. But once I saw how the collapse happened, I could see a few things that went on, and I could see that number one, we in the crypto space are not doing enough to protect people, to help people protect themselves. Unfortunately, the people who were really doing the best for protecting consumers is the Bitcoin Maximalists. And we just have to say it out loud, because they have been saying, not your keys, not your coins. They've been saying it's Bitcoin, not crypto. And I am the lead developer of a project. There are other projects which are doing their best to be a positive, something positive in the world. There are a lot of Ponzi schemes, outright frauds, scams. And we need to be better about pointing out that we can't always say for sure that X or Y is a scam. But what we can say is, when something has these features, you should not give your money to them. I need to give a big disclaimer here, because the facts aren't known for sure yet, and they won't be for probably months. But that's where we need to be able to work with things that we think we know and things that we are probably true. So I'm going to give a lot of things that are likely to be true based on speculation and rumors. And you need to understand that these are speculation and rumors, but the point is not to know the truth 100%. The point is to make better decisions for yourself so that you're not getting yourself into trouble. So the first thing to understand here is about how I'm going to call it rating. I'm going to call it kind of like corporate rating and how this works. So we saw 3 Hours Capital, Luna, and Celsius collapsed a few months ago. The way that those collapsed, they all of a sudden the price went to zero. People couldn't withdraw. Now, how does that happen? How does it happen that one of these organizations suddenly goes bankrupt? What is going on here, and what happens in a lot of cases, is that there's an organization like FTX who then they go and they buy or they borrow a lot of the token. And if say I was a person who wanted to make a lot of money by harming the Luna community, what I could do is borrow millions and millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars worth of Luna. I could find places where I could borrow that Luna token. And then I go to the exchange and I just sell it all at once, sell it. And when I do that, it's going to cause panic, because the price is going to go down a lot. And when that price goes down, other people start to jump on the bandwagon. They start selling because they're afraid that they're going to end up with nothing. And then once they start to sell, then at some point, there isn't enough money in the bank to make people whole. And then the bottom falls out, Luna collapses to practically zero. And me, the criminal, really the biggest criminal involved in all this, I'm buying up all of those Luna that are now worthless. and I can then repay my loan, and I make billions and billions of dollars off this. People need to understand how this attack works, because it's a short selling attack, and people need to understand it because a lot of these organizations, even if the operator of the company had the best intentions at heart, they can still be victimized by a short selling attack. Now, there's some speculation and rumors that FTX was behind Luna or 3 Arrows Capital. That's not proven yet, but this is the kind of thing that you can expect to see, where one large organization is attacking another one using this technique. When FTX collapsed, we remember that what happened was CZ, the CEO of Binance, wrote a tweet and he said, "I don't get along with these people anymore. They were harming the industry." And he said, "As a result, I'm going to sell my FTT token." Now, this is a little bit like the same concept as the raid. However, I understand that he didn't borrow that token. He actually owned it at that time. He then sold it, and that caused FTX to be uncovered. And where they were okay, they were scraping by, they could survive despite the really horrible accounting, which is now starting to come to light. They could scrape by, but once they had that pressure from selling all that FTT token from Binance, now they weren't able to, and that was what triggered their collapse. Now, why did Binance want to sell? Well, what he said, what he indicated, what is the rumor on the internet, is that FTX was trying to push regulation that would make them effectively a monopoly in the United States, so that nobody else could do business, to push everybody else out and establish themselves as a monopoly. This is very important. This is something we need to put a pin in right here, because we're going to come back to this a few times. This aspect about trying to establish yourself as a monopoly using regulation. And all the libertarians and all the Bitcoin maximalists, they all said, you can't do regulation. You can't do regulation correctly, because there will always be this point where a company will bribe the regulators, or they'll be friends with the regulators, and then they will use their influence in order to create regulation tailored to make them the only one that can operate in the business. And the regulators have always kind of said, "Oh, come on, you don't be silly. You're a libertarian, Bitcoin maximalist. It works on paper, but in reality, we can do reality things because we're grown-ups." And the FTX collapse and the fact that they were working with the SEC to establish this regulation, and that precipitated their collapse, has kind of proven the libertarians and the Bitcoin maximalists right in this case, because the SEC was actually in bed with what is kind of a Ponzi scheme. And I'm gonna try to break down why I say FTX was kind of a Ponzi scheme. So there's a lot of people who say Ponzi, Ponzi, Ponzi. Everything's a Ponzi. Every crypto's a Ponzi. $1's a Ponzi, Ponzi, Ponzi. Now, Ponzi scheme has a very specific definition. It is when you are doing an investment with asking people for their money. You're creating an investment for them. You're saying, you put your money with me, and then you can always get it back. Anytime you ask for it, I'll give it back. But I'm going to pay you interest if you put it with me. And when you look at something like FTX Earn, they're not the only one. There's others. And that's where I'm going to give people a warning. You look at FTX Earn, 8% on your money. You just put your crypto with FTX. There's a reason why you don't want to do that. Not only because it's very interesting for a Ponzi schemer to create such a structure where you think that there's a yield coming from something or other, but really the yield is coming from the principal of the investors. So you just need to be the first one out, and you won't be. And that's how Ponzi schemes work. You end up being the one that loses. That's why I will say that FTX is kind of a Ponzi scheme, whereas something like a token or coin, it's not. One could argue a token that's created out of thin air by somebody who is saying, buy my token, and the money that you give me, I will then use to make your token worth more. That could be considered a security. That's the Howey test. That's why you buy the token. But That's not a Ponzi scheme. Ponzi scheme is a very, very specific thing where you're taking the money from the principal of the investors that are putting it up and using it to pay interest to the other investors. So that's why I'm going to give my first warning to everybody, which is don't put your money in any company who is offering you interest, yields. Don't do it. Just don't do it. If you don't know where the yield comes from, it's you. Even if they're honest people, maybe they think that they're doing the best thing for you because they found a very legitimate bank who can pay them interest on that crypto, and everything is 100% clean and 100% papered. I forgot the name of the guy. I think his name was Klein. There was a video floating around the internet of him saying, oh yeah, SBF, both of his parents are compliance lawyers. So this is the one place in crypto where I feel like I'm not going to get in trouble. I don't think he's getting his money back. The origin of crypto was about trying to be more secure than the banks, because the point that crypto tried to make from the beginning, when it was Bitcoin, before it was crypto, the point was that banks are not reliable. They are not stable. They are essentially fraudulent. And the idea of Bitcoin was to give people a way out. Now it's kind of come full circle where they're saying, well, this crypto exchange is so regulated that it's practically a bank. Well, for a Bitcoiner, that's not a good thing. And we're kind of seeing how practically a bank is definitely not a good thing, especially when there's no Federal Reserve who can print more Bitcoin. There's only 21 million. I do not put my money with absolutely anyone who says that they're paying a yield. I don't put my money with anyone. Not your keys, not your coins is a really wise statement. If you don't control that money yourself, then you're taking risk. But we need to do exchanges from time to time. You need to do something. Therefore, you need to custody it for at least a little bit. I don't ever do business with a company which is saying that they will pay you interest on your crypto, because that can only possibly be coming from you. Or maybe they're saying, oh, we found a guy who wants to pay interest on it. Well, what do you think he's doing? And he's found some other guy who says that he's willing to pay interest on it. It's a bit like the recycling thing. You put your plastic bottles in the recycling bin, and the city takes them, and that they take them to somebody, they pay somebody to get rid of them, and that somebody provides them a nice document that says, oh yeah, I'm a legitimate recycling company, I'm going to recycle this. What do? They take them to somebody else who provides them a nice document that says I'm a legitimate recycling company, I'm going to recycle these. They pay them. And then the price at each stage goes down a little more, and the documents get a little sketchier until finally you've got somebody writing I'm going to recycle it on a piece of toilet paper, and he throws it out back and burns it. We have the same problem with crypto. If you put your money with a custodian, you're the person who cares about your money the most, because if you lose it, you lose it. They have an interest in trying to protect it, but it's not as strong as your interest in protecting it. And so if you think it's safe to give your money to them, what do you think they're thinking? They're thinking it's safe to give your money to somebody else. And they're thinking it's safe to give your money to somebody else. And all the way down the line, and each one of them is paying a little more interest than the last one, until there's some idiot paying 25% interest on crypto, and it's obviously a Ponzi scheme. So that's why you can't give your money to anybody, especially if they're offering you interest on it.
My understanding was that he had his other company, trading company, Alameda Research, and then he had FTX, and that he was taking funds from FTX and gambling it in Alameda.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yeah. FTX was insolvent, but nobody knew it because they had enough money to stay alive. Then when CZ decided to sell his FTT tokens, that pushed them over the line, and now they were insolvent and everybody knew it. That was really what triggered it. Now, for how long were they technically insolvent? We don't really know. But this story is a lot like Enron, where there were these little companies. You talked about Alameda. If you look at their corporate structure, it looks to me like a coin tumbler. There's just companies and companies and companies in Germany and the Bahamas and the US, and it's all over the place, all over the map. Most complex corporate structure I've ever seen. And that also is why nobody involved in this company should really be let off the hook. I mean, if they're like, if they swept the floor or they did customer support, fine, whatever. But when the chairman of the SEC says, "Oh, I didn't know," no, you can't believe that for a minute, because you look at the corporate structure. The corporate structure is like Enron. If you just took Enron and took a snapshot of it and then just copy pasted it 10 times over, that's what the corporate structure looked like. Anybody who looked at this stuff should have known if they were in anything like compliance. The Vox article is actually very, very interesting and important, because they said that SBF said, "F regulators, they only make things worse." And that is not in line with what he was doing prior to collapse. He was working with the regulators in order to establish a monopoly by way of regulation that only he could fulfill. It's an old game, and it's very easy to see what he was trying to do. And it's believed that this is why CZ actually decided to dump the tokens in the beginning. But for him to an article to come out where he supposedly leaked, or there was a supposed leak that he was saying F regulators, that doesn't make absolutely any sense. And then a shout out to Autism Capital on Twitter. They dug up the fact that article, the person who wrote it, was involved in his project, Effective Altruism. So what it looks like is going on here is that his close confidants are starting to try to distance themselves from him in very much the same way as how it went after Enron, where everybody pointed at Andy Fastow, and then that didn't quite cut it. So they pointed at Andy Fastow, Jeff Skilling, and Kenneth Lay. That's right. They created all those little companies, but there were banks investing in them. They knew. And there's even if you watch the Enron movie, you've got there's a secret recording where Andy Fastow is presenting that little layout of little companies and in front of these bankers, and they're like, "Yeah, I like this. This really works for me." And those people never saw a day in jail. What we're seeing right now is a lot of the people who were very much involved in the scam are trying to distance themselves from him. The first thing they said was, "Oh, he's a genius that got wrapped up in he made a mistake." And then when that didn't really fly with anybody, now they've kind of flipped the story. And then remember, he gave money to these companies. He gave money to Vox. He gave money to these media organizations. They flipped the story. And so now he's the bad guy. He's a lone wolf, a bad apple, that he did all of this alone and nobody else knew at all what was going on. And neither of these stories hold absolutely any water.
You mentioned that he was going to Washington, D.C. a lot and talking with legislators, etc. How do you know that he was trying to work with them to be a monopoly?
We don't know. We don't know anything because, as I said in the very beginning, none of this is really known to be fact until it's in the history books. And even then, you can't ever really trust the history books. The old stories, winners write history. So all we can do is work with what we think we know at the moment. But it is believed that the reason why CZ got upset with him was because he was pushing this legislation that was meant to establish FTX as a monopoly in the United States. And what's really bizarre is that these senators, these legislators, are still working on this legislation, even though the sponsor is discredited. And it's weird. It's like a thief, and he gets let out of jail, and then the first thing he does is he goes and steals something, and you're gonna get caught, dude. The gig's up. Just don't do that one thing that you're doing. I don't know. It's very bizarre. There's a lot of people just kind of not acting rationally, I think, and there's a lot of people, I think, who they bought in to FTX because they thought, and this is something I think is very important to understand. Remember the guy Klein, I think his name was Klein, and he said, FTX is the one place I know I'm not going to get in trouble. Because they're so super connected. And he's like, oh yeah, it's the establishment.
That's Kevin O'Leary.
Kevin O'Leary. Okay.
Kevin O'Leary.
I mean, there might have been others that said it, but Kevin O'Leary or Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank specifically said that. I mean, he was a paid spokesman for FTX, but he was saying that he had, 100% faith because of the connections to the regulatory, from the family ties with both his girlfriend at Alameda Research and Sam Bankman-Fried at FTX.
Okay, so number one, I don't think Kevin O'Leary is getting his money back. I don't think he's going to skip to the front of the line and say, "Hey, can I get my money?" I don't think that's happening. I think that he thought that because FTX was blessed as kind of in the club, so to speak, and that he felt like, oh, if I just put my money with them, I'm in the club, it's okay. And I want to raise this because it's really important. A lot of people learn geopolitics 101, and they pay very dearly for that course. Back when Bernie Madoff blew up, there was a lot of people who were like, Bernie, how can this happen? You're a Jew, I'm a Jew. How is this possible? And then they just didn't realize it doesn't work that way. It's geopolitics, every man for themselves. That's how the world actually works. These kind of like clubs and the inside and the outside, that is transient. It exists for a moment when that relationship makes sense. But as soon as the money dries up, the club's gone. And if you thought that you were in the club, you're the person who needs the most to be notified that the club is not a real thing. It's only a transient thing that exists in fair weather. And I think that if there's people watching who think that they're on the inside, I just put my money with the good bank, it'll be okay. That these are the people I want to reach to, because you're going to get burned. As soon as you're not necessary, you're going to be burned, and you're going to be wondering, you're going to be standing next to the people that got burned in FTX. You're going to be standing next to the people that got burned by Bernie Madoff, and you're going to be saying, why was it me? I did everything right. And it's like, yeah, that was your problem. You did everything right. If you want to protect yourself, you should probably stack some sats. I mean, I'm not even a Bitcoiner. I'm like, I do my own project. And if you think that my project is worth it, you can buy some. But I'm just telling you, protect yourself, protect your family. Get some Bitcoin or get some gold, whatever, get some cash, put it under your mattress. Like, protect yourself. Don't trust these people like Bernie Madoff, like Sam Bankman-Fried, because you think that they're like you and everything's going to be cool and we're buddies. Because if that's how you're thinking, you're going to be on the one on the outside.
We need exchanges, correct? For this industry, for the crypto industry to succeed and continue to develop, it needs some kind of liquidity. So exchanges are very essential for the growth of this entire industry. So having an exchange necessarily wasn't the crime. It was that they took that money and gambled with it in Alameda Research, and no one saw that coming.
Except all the people that did, because I guarantee you the SEC wasn't just watching over this like, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong here. We're the SEC. It's our job to regulate these companies. We're rubbing shoulders with these people, and they're fine. They're fine. Why does Alameda have all this money? Oh, I don't know.
Who are the perpetrators in Washington, D.C. then that might be involved in this whole thing? Do you think there are some?
Everybody that rubbed shoulders with this guy is a suspect, because, I get it. If you're a retail trader, you saw something on TV, and I saw some of these TV ads, and guys, don't buy it. If it looks like a pyramid scheme, don't buy it. If there was like a TV where the guy's calling his friends and they're like, I'm in, don't buy it. Don't be dumb, okay? I don't know how to say it, but that's retail people. They didn't know better. The people who knew or who should have known is all the people who are close to that group of people. All the people that were taking money from them. You're supposed to know where you're getting your money from. If you're a politician, you should do your basic research. And I get it. If you're a politician who only ever did things with roads or something and he invested in you, okay, I get it. But the SEC, they absolutely should know. This is their job to know. And they were rubbing shoulders with this guy. That's damning.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the whole thing with Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff was reported to the SEC, I believe, 5 or 6 times. He was investigated by the SEC 5 or 6 times before the whole thing eventually blew up. But it's like they all knew what was going on. They were part of it. And I think you could probably say the same thing here. And the same thing with Enron. I mean, Enron, you had Brittany McLean, who wrote the book, The Smartest Guys in the Room, which is what the documentary is based off. She wrote an article, and then 6 months later, you had a bunch of short sellers that ended up shorting Enron, and the whole thing collapsed. But they knew for years. And then I remember I heard an interview with Warren Buffett. They asked Warren Buffett about Enron, and he's like, it was obviously a scam. He's like, I didn't know what was going wrong, but he's like, you could read their 10K form for 5 minutes and know it was too complicated. They were hiding something, and I stayed away from it. He's like a guy that literally reads 10Ks for a living, doesn't even understand it. If Warren Buffett doesn't understand it, who on the planet is going to understand that scheme? And I think the same thing is going on here with the FTX, as you're saying, it essentially resembled Enron. And then you had Kevin O'Leary saying, "Oh, this is never going to happen again." I mean, bull. This happens all the time. Seems like every few years one of these comes out. I mean, and WeWork, and what's going to happen to Sam Bankman-Fried? I don't know. Probably nothing. Like, what about Adam Newman at WeWork? I mean, he's back out there. He's got AWZ or whoever the big firm is already invested another couple $100 million with them.
This reminds me, I wanted to bring up the venture capitalists and the Web3 because there's something that I was watching as this story unfolded. Now, personally, for me, I was very offended to see this collapse because I'm a crypto guy. I write software that manages money for people, and I spend an exorbitant amount of time writing the software in such a way that people can look at that software and know that I'm not doing any funny business. And, to put that kind of effort over that time, and nobody looks, right? It's kind of like it's a thankless job because nobody ever looks. But then when you see somebody else that just ran what I'm going to say is essentially a Ponzi scheme and then funneled that money over to doing political activities, and all these people involved, and everybody's trying to weasel their way out of it. All the rats are fleeing the sinking ship here. And it's offensive because for me to be then like in the crypto space, doing all this work every day to try to make things so that people can audit them all the time, and then having this guy do this. And something that I wanted to call attention to is there was an early tweet. I'm calling him out. It's Mr. Vitallik made a tweet, and he said SPF needs love too, and he, I hope his family is caring for him. Da, 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 da. I was horrified. I was shocked to see this level of fraud, and that was not expressed in Vitallik's tweet. And I'm looking at that, and I'm like, this is not the words of a guy who has no skeletons. So I know it's not polite to call people out. And that's one of the problems with our industry, is that we all kind of have to hold our nose and say, you know what, that guy looks pretty bad, but I can't say it because it's not proven. And if I say it, it's defamation, whatever. It's a problem because people are being led into these traps over and over again, and they're getting owned by these scam artists. What I do want to bring attention to that I think is very important is all of the venture capitalists in that space, all the Web3 venture capitalists, and I'm not going to name the names, but what they're doing is somebody makes a token, they make a big idea, and then their big idea goes and they do basically a pump and dump. They pump the price up, they get a bunch of people on board, and then they dump on retail. And these are name brand venture capital firms that were once great, but the lure of this cheap money has corrupted them and taken them away from their roots. And we need to be attentive to anything involving tokens, anything involving influencers. If there's paid influencers telling you to do something, I'm going to say don't do it, because where's that money come from? It's coming from you. If you're buying, like you found out that the influencers that were behind FTX were getting like $50K or something a month. These crazy
$50K a month
numbers. And where's that money coming from? You know where it's coming from? It's coming from the depositors. That's where it's coming from. It's, Sam Bankman-Fried was not using OnlyFans and making the money there. It's coming from you. So when you're seeing these guys with their Lamborghinis and they're talking about how, you're going to make a lot of money over here, like, you just got to understand that somebody paid for that Lamborghini, and that somebody is the person that deposited. If you don't know where the yield is coming from, it's coming from you.
Yeah, there's some YouTubers out there and influencers. I think Mark Moss is one of them that basically said that this whole implosion of FTX was planned by the World Economic Forum or some of the so-called establishment as a way to kind of discredit crypto and tank crypto. I mean, do you think that there was larger actors that were behind the scenes or what?
Not really. So the WEF, and I called them out on Twitter as well, because like the fact that they had FTX on their website as one of their partners, and they were pumping the shill in the coin. Then all of a sudden they just let's just remove the web page. No, they wouldn't even do the effort to make a blog post and say, look, we associated with the wrong crowd. We're very sorry about that. We wish that we hadn't led anybody to that. I mean, I never even knew about FTX, and I feel bad for being in the crypto space with this guy. And the World Economic Forum thinks it's okay to just drop the page off of their website. I mean, that's max shady. The idea that they planned this, I don't think they planned this. I think CZ planned this. CZ knew that they were uncovered. He knew that they were doing dirty stuff. Now, was the WEF involved in the dirty stuff they were doing with trying to establish a monopoly? That's a deeper question, and it's one that I don't think we have the information to really speculate. I think that CZ knew that this was a dirty operation. They were harming everyone, and so CZ decided to sell the tokens, which led to the collapse of that operation.
Do you think that this right now is kind of aha moment for a lot of Bitcoiners, Bitcoin maximalists? It seems like you were saying, I mean, not your keys, not your coins, which is the Bitcoin maximalist saying, but it's not centralized finance if you're taking a decentralized token and keeping it on a centralized exchange, right? I mean, like, that was never the intention of Bitcoin. That was never I think a lot of these other actors had just jumped on the bandwagon, like we saw in the 90s with the whole .com era as well, or .com boom.
No, absolutely. I think that this is not only vindicated Bitcoin maximalists, and granted, like I have a complex relationship with Bitcoin maximalists. I find them a little bit annoying because they're going around saying that I am a scam artist because, that's their opinion, is that any cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin is a scam. However, what I have to give them is that if a person came into the crypto space via being educated by a Bitcoin maximalist, the worst thing they could do is buy the top. If a person came into the crypto space via being educated by a crypto trader, and then they went on YouTube and they started scrolling through influencers to find new projects, they statistically are going to just get rug pulled over and over and over again. And in that way, we just have to give it to the Bitcoin maximalists that they are more right than the average person in crypto.
Well, it's funny. I was just kind of thinking of something funny because you said something about OnlyFans. Like SBF is not using OnlyFans. I think he needs to get an account now and make some money.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. Did you hear about the sex tape?
Okay, walk us through the sex tape. We did hear about it, but walk us through it.
Yeah, we
walk
heard
us
the
through
rumors.
the sex tape.
Walk us through this.
Okay, so
what is happening?
Somebody puts up a website and says, "I can't get you your money back, but there's a sex tape." Okay, let's break this down. What's going on here? Okay, anybody can put up a website, right? Later on, there comes a tweet which has a picture in it that was either a good deep fake or maybe there is a sex tape. I mean, look, I'm a married guy. I have a daughter. I have had sex in my life. It exists, but there's no sex tapes of me. And I'm wondering, are these people dumb? Did they think that it made sense to have sex and record it on a video? I mean, how do you make it
with your iPhone?
How do you make it to the top of a business like that? And you think that it's a good idea to just go make a sex tape. And that also gets to another thing, which is all the people who had everything going for them in their political career, and they thought it would just be a grand idea to go and hang out with Jeffrey Epstein. And that is the why. Why is there a sex tape? Why? And we don't know there is. Maybe there isn't. Maybe there's nothing. But we do know that a lot of people thought it was a really interesting idea for them to take a detour in their rock star political career, making it to the top, for them to go visit Jeffrey Epstein's island and have sex with an underage person. And you have to ask why. Why are these people dumb? Well, I mean, if they're dumb, how did they get to the top of their organization? If they're smart, then why would they do something as dumb as that? You have these people doing this, and I mean, to hear the conspiracy theory is about power. It's a way to get power over somebody, because whoever holds the sex tape is the one that has the power over the person who is in it. And they can tell that person then what to do.
I mean, I just think it speaks about the larger economic issue. I mean, Robert Gordon wrote a book maybe a decade ago where he basically said that there's been no real growth in the economy. In real GDP. Real GDP, for those that don't know, is essentially adjusted for inflation since the early 1970s, with the exception of about a 8-year period during the kind of the start of the internet era. And even after the iPhone came out, like, it's just been decreasing. And back in the day, they were building dams, they were building these large projects. They were actual engineers. Nowadays, all the engineers that make money are quote unquote financial engineers. And I think that instead of actually creating real products, instead of actually creating real industry, we're now just cooking the books, so to speak. And I think this goes back to like a larger economic problem of being a grift economy instead of an economy that actually creates real things, especially in the US, where a lot of the manufacturing has been pushed off the mainland onto other countries where they don't even manufacture a lot of things, which I think you saw happen during the pandemic, where people couldn't even get PEP supplies because they don't even manufacture them here anymore.
It's a good question, right? I mean, clearly there's a certain element of this kind of bullshit jobs, bullshit industries, where there's just nothing of value being made. And I mean, we in the crypto space are a little bit guilty of this as well, because I mean, we're trying, we do our best to try to make something that's of value to people. But in a lot of cases, the incentives drag a lot of these projects toward things that aren't really that useful at all. I mean, monkey pictures, come on, guys. Let's make value for humanity. Let's advance the human race. Let's not, come on. You know what I mean?
It sounds like China hustle all over again to me.
China hustle? What's
yeah,
that?
You familiar with the China hustle?
Not exactly.
There was
a shell game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the shell company game. Yeah. So it was basically these companies that created no value, or they were dilapidated companies, and then they just kind of played accounting games and got on the stock market in the US. And these companies, had no infrastructure in China. If you went over there, they had no employees. They weren't creating anything, but people were making a lot of money, and the suckers, sure lost their money, so.
The problem is that like it's not even that everybody's a scammer. It's more like if you try to make something in the world, you're like, I'm going to make the world a better place by making a product that's going to help people. And if you do that, like you just start encountering regulation. You try to open a factory, the environmentalists show up. Everything, it's just nothing works for you. But if you sit in your house and you make software, then you can make a lot of money. In Web 2.0, it was selling eyeballs, selling ads, selling clicks. Web 3.0, it's selling rug pulls. I'm sorry. All the incentives in the modern regulatory environment are just set up toward pushing people to do things that are not valuable to society. So to actually make value, you have to fight against this entire infrastructure of society. It's very difficult.
What is going to happen after this collapse, do you think, to the entire industry as a whole? Can it recover? What needs to happen for it to recover?
So, I mean, if you said what needs to happen, what do we need to do? I would have said end the Fed. But when you're short, you're contracting it down to, okay, we're talking about the crypto industry, in specific. I think it will recover. I think there's no doubt that the value making aspects of crypto are going to come back, because there is value. The value is the ability to cut out the middleman, to cut out the banking industry, and to work around it. I think that what recovers is going to be leaner and meaner than what existed before. There's probably going to be another pump. I mean, this is sort of the end of the 2020, 2021 pump, whereas there was the 2017 ICO craze, then the 2020 to 2022 NFTs and that whole thing. There will be more fraud, more scams, more trickery in the future. However, I think that what makes it out of this next winter is going to be more the real projects, the stuff that is making value for people. And of course, I mean, blockchains, regular old proof of work blockchains like mine, they outlive the cockroaches because they don't really need anything in order to survive. As long as there's somebody willing to mine it, it just continues to go.
Well, it seems like you think we may be like decades from kind of having the entire crypto industry that, there's actually value created, like there's actually Ubers and Airbnbs, created.
No, not decades. Definitely not that far, because things are heating up so fast. I think that where we are right now is just a small contraction. And I mean, it's going to hurt, but it's still small in the grand scheme of things. I think that the future is going to be a lot more Bitcoin, a lot more Lightning Network. I hope a lot more Packet. That's my personal dream. My personal vision is to make the internet something that individual people can own and operate. And I think it's very important to the whole story that we're getting the internet off of these big ISPs. How far out until? I mean, I don't see it being that far at all. Assuming we don't end up in some kind of like a nuclear annihilation or something that just throws the whole story off, which we need to work really hard to make sure we don't.
Yeah, Caleb, thank you so much for coming back and talking about this FTX collapse. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us a second time. What would you say is the main takeaway message of the FTX collapse from a developer standpoint, or just someone that's actually heavily involved in the Web3 crypto space? What is the takeaway message here?
Nobody's going to protect you. It's not developer specific, but you just need to understand there's no club, there's no group, there's nobody you're not going to be safe. You got to stack sats, you got to protect yourself, protect your family, have some cash put away, have some Bitcoin. And then after you've gotten your affairs in order, then you can start to think about, well, I believe in Monero, I believe in Zcash, I believe in Packet. These are things that I believe in and I care about and I want to be involved in. But you need to go back to your first principles and not your keys, not your coins, stack sats, be a Bitcoin maximalist for a while, because none of these like FTX earn type of things are going to protect you in the end. You're not on the inside of the club.
To me, it seems like could almost be a good thing. I mean, you're flushing out a lot of just the people that are in the space strictly as speculators, or people that are looking at it as an investment, like Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, and a lot of these other people. They come into the space only because they think they can make money, not because they care about the space or want to be part of it. And it seems like this is just going to flush out a lot of the people that never were in the space for the right reasons anyways.
That's a narrative that people, that's a philosophy. However, you can take the philosophy that a fool and his money are soon parted, that we shouldn't, try to protect the weak from getting defrauded. If you take that philosophy, then you accept the morality of running a casino. And when you see, these people like that don't have money and they're pressing the slot machines, I don't think that narrative, that theory can stand up in all cases. I think that there is an incumbency on society to protect the weak. We know that doing things in a way like the SEC doesn't work because these things always get captured. Bernie Madoff was on a committee, an advisory committee to the SEC. He was part of a big regulator. SBF was, rubbing shoulders with the SEC, and he had some family relationships with the chairman. It doesn't work to do it that way, but we still need to try in some way, because we can't just let the weakest of society be messed up by the strong.
Very curious to see what unfolds. I also do believe that this incident is good for the industry as a whole, to just do a little cleanup, if you will, and just sending a lot of love and light to the people that lost their funds or life savings. And my heart goes out to everyone that lost money in this craziness. But I hope that we bounce back. So Thank you again, Caleb, and we'll see you again soon. Hope to have you on once again.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for giving me a platform to get this message out to people. I think it's very important.
That is it for this episode of a podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for listening, wherever you're listening, and watching if you're on YouTube. If you're not subscribed, be sure to subscribe, because at 100,000 subscribers, Jesse and I will get married. That is the metric that we're experimenting with. And thank you all for listening and watching and supporting our content. Also visit us at lpodcast.media, and we'll see you all on the next episode.